If you felt drawn to this, there's a reason. Your energy is already waking up, and it's searching for something ancient. What you'll discover here isn't modern theory. It's a forgotten system, hidden in plain sight for centuries. The laws you're about to learn come from Magia Naturalis, a book once guarded by alchemists and seekers of true power. They knew, just as you do now, that nature doesn't just surround you, it speaks through you. And when you understand how to listen, everything changes. You were right to wonder. That feeling you've always had, that there's more to the wind than weather, more to the forest than trees, more to the silence between sounds. It meant something. You didn't imagine it. You noticed what most have forgotten to see, because nature has never been still, never passive, never out there. It breathes, it listens, it remembers. Long before we split the world into parts, body and soul, matter and spirit, human and wild, there was only one living thing, one vast, intelligent being. The ancient ones called it anima mundi, the soul of the world. Not poetry, not metaphor, reality. Before we dissected it, maybe you felt it before, though you didn't have a name for it, in the hush of a forest path that felt like it was watching you back, in the way animals sometimes seem to move in time with your breath, in the strange pull of a full moon that makes no logical sense but changes you anyway. That's not superstition, that's the current underneath the surface. Plato tried to explain it once in a tale called Timaeus. He spoke of a cosmos built by a divine mind, fashioned from reason, infused with life. He said the universe was a living creature with a soul and intelligence of its own, not created randomly, but formed according to a deep harmony, a sacred logic. Others came after him, quiet scholars, mystics, seekers, who felt that same truth stirring through the world. They became keepers of a hidden thread. You might hear them called hermeticists, though most never used that name for themselves. To them, the world was the body of spirit, made visible, and everything in it moved with meaning. There was once a man, an observer of storms, shadows, seeds, who spent his life listening to the patterns in nature. His name was Giambattista della Porta. He wasn't just a scientist or a mystic. He stood between worlds, watching how the visible echoed the invisible. And he said something simple, something that still echoes if you let it. Magic, he wrote, is nature itself in all its aspects. He was reminding us that magic is not about bending nature to your will. It's about aligning with her deeper movement, learning her rhythms, trusting that she knows what she's doing and that you are part of that knowing. Because nature is not just alive, she is intelligent, self-directed, a great weaver with a plan written in forces most have forgotten how to feel. And if you slow down, if you listen, you'll start to feel the pattern too. You've already felt it, that draw between certain people, that strange timing when something shows up just as you need it, that internal pull that says, go here, or don't trust that. That's not chance, that's nature's voice, speaking in the only way she can, through feeling, through rhythm, through resonance. The old ones believed there was a literal force of love that moved through nature, not poetic love, not sweet or soft, a force that attracts like iron to a magnet, like root to water, like planets caught in orbit, that pull you feel toward certain places, certain objects, even certain thoughts. It's real. It's energetic structure, not coincidence. Imagine nature as an enchanted tapestry. Every star, every stone, every blade of grass, stitched in with purpose, connected by threads. You cannot see threads of sympathy, of harmony, of deep recognition. This isn't fantasy. This is how the Renaissance magicians saw the world. To them, a plant wasn't just a plant. It was a note in a larger song, an expression of a deeper code. Nothing was random. Everything obeyed principles, some visible, most hidden. They called it lex naturae, the law of nature. Not the kind you read in a science book, but the law underneath the laws. The one that governs energy before it takes form. The law that explains why some things attract and others repel. Why a certain stone feels charged in your palm, or why the sound of a name can carry weight long after it's spoken. And once you begin to see that, once you remember that nature is not just around you, but alive with you, the whole world shifts. You stop trying to make things happen. You start learning how to listen. And when you do, something strange begins to reveal itself. You start to notice that certain things, objects, places, even animals, carry a kind of weight, not physical, but something else, something just behind the surface. You pick up a stone and it feels charged, almost watchful. You walk under a tree and feel your chest ease, as if the branches remember something you've forgotten. You step into a room and instantly know whether you're welcome or not. That knowing what you're sensing is real. It's what the old ones called virtus occulta, an occult virtue, a hidden force inside natural things, not magic tricks, not illusion. These were subtle, living powers tucked into the bones of the world, and they were everywhere. A leaf wasn't just a leaf. It had a shape, a color, a scent, a rhythm, and also a secret, a resonance, a kind of whisper. And that whisper could soothe or stir, protect or provoke, depending on how you met it. The Renaissance magicians believed every object held more than what the eye could see. They said the power in a thing was often small in amount, but immensely potent. The secret wasn't in size, it was in essence, like the tiniest seed holding the pattern of an entire tree, or the scent of a flower triggering a memory so deep it brings tears you can't explain. There was a man named Agrippa, part philosopher, part mystic, who spent his life tracing the hidden architecture of the world. He once wrote that occult virtues come from causes whose origins lie hid, and man's intellect cannot find them out. He wasn't being evasive, he was being honest. This wasn't knowledge to be dissected. It was something to be felt, remembered, intuited, something that asked for more than logic. It asked for trust. Those who worked with these forces, herbalists, alchemists, seers, they didn't see nature as a tool. They treated it like a language, or maybe more like a code, one you had to learn by listening, watching, being still enough to catch the way light moves through water, or how a root curls through stone. They noticed how a plant grew when it bloomed, what it grew beside. They studied not just the shape of things, but their gestures, their presence, and the world responded. The manuals they left behind read like dream books, now strange tales and impossible creatures. But if you read them with your body, not just your mind, something deeper unlocks. A salamander, they said, could survive in fire. A fish called echinacea could steal a ship at sea. An ostrich could eat iron and live. There was a barren tree that calmed an angry bull. A hyena whose shadow could silence a barking dog. To us, maybe these sound like fables, but to those who walked the path before us, they were clues. Not because the world was full of monsters, but because It was full of meaning. They believed that nature revealed herself through marvels, that what seemed strange was not an error but a signal, a door opening to deeper laws. They called them sympathies and antipathies, hidden affinities, energies that reach for each other across distance, across form. Why some stones pull and others repel. Why certain herbs open the lungs or soothe the blood. It wasn't random, it was design, just not the kind you could see with ordinary eyes. This is where second sight was born, not from fantasy, from attention. The kind of seeing that happens when you stop naming things and start feeling them. When you stop asking what something does and start listening to what it wants. Because nothing in nature is silent. It just speaks in a language beneath the noise. And these virtues, these hidden forces, they were always there, nestled in bark, tucked inside minerals, coiled in scents, pressed between petals, waiting for someone who could feel their shape, someone who would treat them not as resources, but as messengers. You felt it, the way your body responds to certain places, the way one object seems to hum while another goes cold, the pull towards something you don't understand but know is meant for you. That's the language they followed. That's how they knew what to gather, what to burn, what to place beneath the tongue or under the moon. Because nature didn't just speak in whispers, it wrote in shapes. They called it the doctrine of signatures, the idea that every form, every pattern in nature was marked with a purpose, a kind of divine handwriting, not metaphor, but memory carved into matter. A leaf shaped like a lung, it eases breath. A walnut split down the center, its folds mirroring the human brain, good for calming the mind. These weren't coincidences, they were signs. Wounds in bark that mirrored wounds in flesh, roots that looked like bones and strengthened them. The shape of a thing, they believed, was the clue to its spirit. Paracelsus, a man who saw more in a single herb than most see in a lifetime, once said, "Nature marks each growth according to its curative benefit." He trusted what he saw, and what he saw was that the world had been left to us like a map, not one drawn with roads and borders, but one made of resemblance, echo, design. Della Porta tried to gather these clues into a single body of knowing. He wrote a book called Phytog Mnemonica, not a spell book, but a study, a record of patterns, of roots and stems, leaves and colors, placed side by side with the human body and its ailments. He was searching for the logic behind the living, for the blueprint behind the bloom. Because once you start to really look, you'll see it everywhere. The spiral of a sunflower is not random. The coil of a nautilus shell is not just pretty. They follow a number, a proportion, a secret rhythm the ancients knew by feel. What we now call Fibonacci, they felt as breath, as pulse. Petals form around invisible geometry. Seeds align with unseen order. Even the path of planets, the way they dance around the sun, is drawn by the same ratio that echoes in your bones. To the Renaissance mind, this wasn't theory, it was evidence that everything sky, root, skin, breath was made from the same code. That harmony wasn't decoration, it was instruction, a signpost, and underneath it all, something deeper. Affective structure. The truth that things don't just look similar, they move toward each other or away. That certain forces attract, others repel. That there is a pull to the world, a magnetic logic, a quiet gravity, not emotional, though you feel it that way, not scientific, though it governs science. It's the reason your body leans forward when something calls, the reason your hand hesitates before touching what looks harmless but hums with no. The magnet was their proof. They watched it draw iron across distance, invisible, undeniable. They didn't call it a field, they called it sympathy. A visible desire between two things, once connected, always drawn back. And that's how they worked. Not randomly, not with superstition, but with alignment. If you wanted to draw something in, you used its echo, its partner. If you wanted to heal, you chose what looked like the wound, but whole. If you wanted to influence a force, you didn't fight it. You mirrored it. Everything had its match, its moment, its correspondence. And so they arranged things with care. Laid stones beside organs, burned herbs under specific stars, placed metals near breath or blood, depending on what needed remembering. They followed the shapes because the shapes were instructions. Magic, to them, wasn't unnatural. It was ultra-natural. The geometry beneath the leaves, the architecture of what moves through you, the hidden scaffolding of the real. And when you learn to see it not with your eyes, but with your knowing, you begin to move through the world differently. You begin to remember where everything belongs, including you, because you were never separate from it. You are not outside the pattern. You are the pattern, folded in. The old magicians knew this. So did the midwives and mystics and watchers of the night sky. They saw your body, not as a shell or machine, but as a mirror, a scaled down echo of the cosmos itself. As above, so below, they said, not as poetry, but as law, as fact. Everything the heavens did, the body reflected. Every movement of the stars had its answer written in flesh. And so they mapped it. They looked at the arc of constellations across the sky and found their rhythm in the body's curve. Aries, fierce and bright, ruled the head, the rush of blood, the spark behind the eyes. Taurus grounded the neck and throat, steady and unmoving like stone. Gemini moved into the shoulders and lungs, breath flickering like twin winds. The zodiac became more than symbols. It was anatomy, living astrology. Cancer watched over the chest, the breasts, the tides of feeling and nourishment. Leo, the lion, held the heart and the spine radiant, fire-fed. Virgo traced the intestines, quiet, discerning, coiled with quiet intelligence. Libra balanced the kidneys, the lower back, the scales pivot. Scorpio curled into the reproductive organs, secret and intense. Sagittarius moved down into the thighs, the pathwalkers. Capricorn ruled the knees, the gatekeepers of humility. Aquarius ran through the calves and ankles, motion, disruption, water in air. Pisces ended at the feet, the dreamers, dissolving the body into sea. Each sign an element, each element a current in you. It wasn't metaphor, it was function. The way fire lives in the gaze, how the voice carries earth when the truth is spoken plainly. The lungs pull air, not just for breath, but for presence. The bloodstream moves like water through the terrain of your bones. And when one part faltered, they didn't just treat the organ, they read the sky. They looked for where the pattern was out of step, where a planet pulled too hard, where heat had gathered without release, where air had become too still to speak. It was medicine, and it was magic. Not the sleight of hand kind, the kind rooted in rhythm, in respect. They used the body like a weather map, tracking the rise and fall of the inner climate. Pulse was not just pulse, it was tide. Breath was not just breath, it was the wind inside the temple. They weren't the only ones who saw it this way. In alchemy, the heart was terra, the ground, the center, the place everything grows from or returns to. The lungs were air in motion, the music between worlds. The eyes held Ignis, fire, because they didn't just see, they lit. In Ayurveda, in Taoist medicine, in the shadowed halls of ancient Egypt everywhere, the body was understood as a small version of the world, a mirror that fogged when the truth dimmed, a compass when aligned. You feel this even now. You know when your fire is low, when your air is too scattered, when your ground shakes or your waters overflow. You've said it before without thinking. I feel ungrounded. My energy is off. I can't catch my breath. That's not metaphor. That's memory. That's your body trying to speak the old language. And once you remember how to hear it, you stop fighting it. You start working with it, because the body isn't just a vehicle. It's an engine, a receiver, a resonator. When tuned, it doesn't just survive, it harmonizes with earth, with air, with what moves above and what rises within. And that's where the real work begins, because flesh is only the first layer. What most people call a body is only the part they can see, the part that aches and hungers and sweats through the night. But you've felt the rest. You've brushed against something just outside your skin, some invisible hum that stretches a little past your fingertips. You've walked into a room and felt the weight of someone's energy before they ever spoke. That isn't imagination. That's contact. The body extends. It breathes in layers. The ancients spoke of subtle bodies, not metaphors, not spiritual fantasies, but structures made of finer matter. The first is the etheric. It clings closest to the skin, wraps around you like mist wrapped in will. It breathes with you, sleeps with you, cracks when you lie, steadies when you walk in truth. It's the bridge between the seen and unseen, a sheath of vital force. Some called it prana, others pneuma, but the sensation is always the same, a living current feeding the flesh from the inside out. And it doesn't stop there. Beyond the etheric is the astral, softer, lighter, like breath made of feeling. You feel it when your chest tightens from someone's sorrow, or when the presence of a person fills the space like scent. It holds emotion like a sky, holds weather, sometimes clear, sometimes heavy. It's what drifts in dreams, what remembers a touch years after the body forgets. Then the mental body, sharper, brighter, sometimes blinding. It isn't thought the way we use the word now. It's will, focus, fire, the part of you that burns towards something even when you don't know why, the one that chooses. It's made of light, not logic. Each layer, each field tied to an element. The etheric carries the weight of earth and the movement of water, holding form, keeping flow. The astral breathes air it stirs, lifts, scatters, sings, and the mental flares with fire, pure intensity, raw direction, a current that either burns or blesses depending on how you hold it. You've worked with these already, even if you didn't name them, when you breathe deep into your belly. Not the shallow chest breath, but the kind that drops into the ground. You're feeding your etheric body, stabilizing it, reminding your system that it is safe to root. That's not a relaxation trick. That's elemental medicine, air brought into earth. When you hum low in your chest or chant a tone that vibrates in your bones, you're stoking the fire in your mental layer. You're warming the field, pulling your spirit back into alignment. You've done it without knowing why, but your body remembered. And when your breath moves like a tide, slow, full, even you're weaving it all together. Earth, air, fire, water, every layer responding, every field settling back into its right place. That's not spiritual practice. That's tuning the instrument, because the body is an instrument, a finely strung, deeply responsive, vibrating field of forces. And when it's out of tune, Everything misfires, desire dims, clarity clouds, the world feels too loud. But when it's aligned, when the breath is steady, the posture alive, the voice clear, you don't have to try so hard to attract or protect or create. You become the magnet. You become the vessel. This is how they lived. The ones who came before, they didn't think of these things as mystical. They were necessary. Like brushing teeth, like warming the hands. You tone the voice, not for sound, but for structure. You breathe, not just to live, but to live clean. You sit in stillness, not to escape, but to tune in, to listen to where the field has gone thin, or tangled, or burned too hot. They adjusted, recalibrated, daily, with gesture, with rhythm, with sound, because the energies around you are real, and your field is real. And when one learns to speak to the other, the world starts to listen back. But it listens through you, not just your breath, or your hands, or the rituals you perform. It listens through your face, through your presence, through what you carry without even knowing. There's something most people miss because they're too used to separating the inside from the outside. But the old practitioners didn't see it that way. They believed every feeling you've ever held is written somewhere on your body, not in scars or weight or posture alone, but in the soft geometry of your expression, the way your eyes hold light, the angle of your mouth, the way you walk into a room and change the air without saying a word. They called it physiognomy. The face is a map, a mirror of the soul, yes, but also of your elemental state. Fire too high and the eyes dart, the jaw locks, the cheeks flush. Water unbalanced and the face goes slack, dimmed, too porous. Earth out of place and the features tighten, harden, lose softness. Air scattered and you'll see it in the twitch, the glance that never lands, the breath that won't sit still. Porter once said that every vice, every emotion, every secret inclination shows itself, that you don't have to speak to reveal yourself. Your face does it for you, but it moves both ways. And this is where it gets powerful, because if your face tells the truth of what's within, then changing the outer expression can reshape the current underneath. A softened brow can signal peace to the heart. A lengthened spine can realign the will. The eyes, when focused not in tension, but in quiet alertness, can gather your scattered field. You've felt this. You've seen someone step into a new posture and become something else. You've done it yourself. Stood differently, breathed with purpose, and felt your whole self shift in response. This is not performance. This is participation. And one of the oldest tools for this kind of work was the mirror. Not the kind hung for vanity, not the one cluttered with lights or dusted in fingerprints. I'm speaking of the mirror as threshold, a surface that doesn't just reflect skin, but field, a place where light and energy fold back on themselves. Women once stared into mirrors in silence, watching not their face, but the shadows behind the eyes. They weren't admiring, they were scrying, listening. In ritual, mirrors weren't accessories, they were instruments. A polished metal mirror could catch starlight like a bowl catches water. It could hold a gaze and return it charged. Magicians used them to amplify intent, to focus thought, to send something silent and unseen back out into the world with direction. Because the mirror doesn't just reflect you, it reflects the universe through you. That's what they believed, that the body, the full form, the aura, the expressions that rise without asking, wasn't just a vessel, it was the conduit, a bridge of flesh and breath and light, a listening post, a transmitter, a flame wrapped in clay. And so they moved with care. They breathed like it mattered. They spoke as if each sound shaped something. They held their bodies like sacred instruments, kept in tune by daily touch. The rituals weren't about control, they were about remembrance. Because when you remember that your blood runs with the same rhythm as rivers, that your eyes burn with a spark lit by the stars, that your breath moves tides of air you cannot see, you begin to understand. The body is not the end of magic, it is where it begins. And what moves through it, what supports it, surrounds it, strengthens it, has never been lifeless. Stones, metals, minerals, and they are not dead matter. They are slow fire, condensed breath, the solid echoes of something stellar. You can feel it if you hold them long enough. A pulse, a weight that's not just physical, a presence that isn't yours, but willing to listen. The old magicians knew this. They held gold, like sunlight held still. They wore silver, not for beauty, but to align the tides in the body with the tides in the sky. Each metal was born of a planet, shaped in its image, and when touched with intent, it remembered where it came from. Gold belonged to the sun, always has. It carries the clarity of light at its highest point, radiant, kingly, life-giving, not loud, not gaudy, just undeniable. Silver was the moon's reflection, cool, quiet, responsive. It didn't shine, it glowed, it calmed the blood, it softened the noise, it steadied dreams. Iron was forged under Mars. You could feel it in your teeth, weighty, raw, edged with heat, used for courage, for defense, for the kind of strength that breaks what would harm you. Copper belonged to Venus, warm, harmonic, open. It soothed, it healed, it brought beauty into alignment with balance. Tin carried Jupiter's breadth, prosperity, not as luck, but as expansion, the kind of wisdom that grows things. Mercury, fluid and strange, ruled its namesake, metal quicksilver, intelligence in motion, thought without form, dangerous if unanchored, but holy when aimed. And lead Saturn's child was the deep anchor, heavy as truth, slow as reckoning, used to hold things in place, to ground visions that flew too high, to teach patience, to mark time. They didn't just assign metals to planets and leave it there. They worked with them. They wore them when the stars aligned. They placed them on the body like keys in locks, each one opening or sealing something vital. Gold near the heart, silver at the wrist, iron along the spine or solar plexus when courage was needed, copper over the chest to mend what had been fractured by grief. And it wasn't just metals. Stones remembered too. Hematite was Mars, made solid iron's cousin, dark and blood-bound. You'd wear it for courage, for grounding, for protection, not to decorate the body, but to shield it. Lapis lazuli carried the wisdom of Saturn, deep blue, veined with gold like the night sky speaking in script. It wasn't worn for status, it was worn to remember who you are under pressure. Turquoise, soft and sky-touched, was Venus's child, meant to soothe, to bring the heart back into rhythm with peace. The weight of a thing mattered. So did its sheen, its cut, its coolness or warmth against the skin. These weren't ornaments, they were allies, not symbolic, functional tools meant to harmonize your field with the greater field, your will, with the will of the heavens. When you wore them, you weren't accessorizing, you were aligning. When you touched them in ritual, you were making contact, and they responded. still do, quietly, powerfully, always waiting for someone who knows how to speak the language of density, color, temperature, tone. And if you've ever felt drawn to a stone for no good reason, if you've ever picked up a piece of metal and just known it meant something, you were already speaking it. You didn't imagine it, you remembered, especially with the lodestone, that dark, unassuming stone that hums quietly in the hand. It doesn't glitter, doesn't shine, but if you hold it long enough, it starts to pull first your skin, then something deeper. There's a reason it was never treated like just another rock. The old ones called it proof, because the lodestone moves things. It doesn't pretend, it pulls. It calls iron to itself from across space, and in doing so, it reveals a law. Most people forget exists sympathy, hidden correspondence, the invisible thread between things that once knew each other and still remember. They believed it showed how the world really works, not through force, but through relation. One thing drawn to another, not by accident, but by design. Not everything could be explained, but the pull could be felt. And that was enough. Giambattista della Porta spent his life chasing this mystery. He saw the lodestone, not just as curiosity, but as key. He watched it dance between poles, push and pull, reverse itself, depending on its orientation. It behaved like it had a mind, like it knew who it wanted and when. He reversed poles in his experiments, placed stones in mirrored positions, studied what happened when they faced each other or turned away. To him, this wasn't mechanics. It was duality, alive in stone, polarity as an embodied law. He wasn't alone in believing it. Others wore rings, made from it not for fashion, but for draw, for pull, for the way it seemed to change the space around the wearer. There were whispers that sleeping with hematite, magnetized or not, could call love to your bed or keep it there. Not because the stone made someone fall, but because it aligned the field so that what you wanted could find you. The weight of the material mattered. The heavier the stone, the deeper the pull. Lead, iron, hematite, they grounded, they steadied, they held the body down when the mind wandered too far. Amber, light, and electric moved like breath in the field, lively, flickering, restless. Pumice floated on water, used when you needed to rise above something, to lighten your energy without losing it. But none of these worked just because they existed. They needed to be woken up. And that was the part most people missed. You couldn't just find a stone and expect it to know you. You had to introduce yourself. Let it feel your breath. Let it drink from something sacred. Some used oil pressed from herbs under moonlight. Some used water from springs or storms or melted snow. What mattered was the exchange. Others whispered into them, not words to command, but words to bond. A name, a prayer, a question, a truth. And then the sun or the moon left under sky, they changed. They warmed or cooled or deepened in shade. And somehow they listened differently after. Stones were alive, just slowly. You had to be patient to hear them speak. When the practitioner placed the stone, after all this on the altar, in the pouch, beside the bed, it wasn't just stone anymore. It had been touched, spoken to, filled. It had memory now. It had direction. That's how they used them. Not like accessories, like extensions, like limbs that reached where hands couldn't, carriers of will. Not because the stone had power, but because it agreed to hold yours. But intention was only part of the work. Placement mattered. Position was everything. They understood the body, not just as a vessel, but as a landscape of currents, each center alive with its own hunger, its own tone. So they didn't just carry the stones, they placed them like keys in locks. Iron was laid over the solar plexus when the spirit dimmed or the will was thin. That space, just below the ribs, was seen as the seat of self. When your boundaries wavered, when fear crept in, when anger turned cold, a disk of Mars-fed iron could steady the flame again, not because of superstition, but because the metal knew how to hold fire without burning. Clear quartz went to the forehead, right between the brows, where thought becomes vision. It was known to amplify whatever you gave it: clarity, confusion, direction, desire. That's why they called it the Master Stone, not because it ruled the others, but because it listened the best. You had to be honest with quartz. It didn't lie and wouldn't protect you from your own signal. Copper was worn over the chest, not for decoration, but because it remembered Venus. It knew the rhythm of the heart, the stretch of lungs, the slow ache of grief, and the bright pulse of joy. In potions, it softened edges. In metal, it warmed cold emotion.